It's a pleasure to be here with you on NIMASA this week. I'm quite excited because gradually the economy is waking up. We know COVID-19 is still there, but gradually the Nigerian government is opening up our economy as we're moving into the second phase of that particular matter. And also, we're quite happy that even though we know that most part of the Nigerian economy became kind of comatose because of the pandemic and all the lockdowns, the maritime sector remained alive because it's very, very essential all over the world. And there were a lot of things put in place to ensure that it didn't grind to a halt too. Now, NIMASA had to do a lot of things to contribute our own quota in making this a reality. From emergency meetings with stakeholders to different guidelines to help seafarers, dock workers, and other things that kept shipping alive in Nigeria. We'll be sharing those with you today as a form of the program. We'll be reviewing this, and you'll see that, of a truth, NIMASA has done a lot this period. Welcome. My name is Cordelia Obe.
The coronavirus pandemic is real. NIMASA wants us to stay safe so we can stay alive. Observe social distancing, avoid crowded areas, wash your hands regularly with soap or use alcohol-based hand sanitizers. And most importantly, stay at home. Together, we shall win the war against this coronavirus. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA.
Now, when COVID-19 landed here, it came like a big disaster. A lot of things had to change. Our lifestyles completely changed. Social gatherings, businesses, all came to a halt. Banks, churches, you name them. The economy actually knew that something had hit it. But one sector still remained. And one kept wondering, how did NIMASA and stakeholders manage to ensure that ships were still calling at our ports? I'm very sure that you would like to know how that happened too. Well, do sit back, relax, as I share some of the things that happened that made that possible with you. In the light of the new reality, the management of NIMASA, under the leadership of Dr. Bashir Yusuf Jamal, knew that some drastic actions must be taken to ensure the maritime sector did not shut down in Nigeria. The NIMASA management immediately introduced new policies to guide the operations of all ship owners, shipmasters, shipping companies, and the entire maritime stakeholders in Nigeria. A marine notice was published. The guidance were to support all types of ships that operate in the Nigerian maritime domain and help shipping companies and all maritime stakeholders to follow advice provided by United Nations agencies, including the World Health Organization, WHO, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and the International Labour Organization, ILO, including the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC.
Pursuant to the current coronavirus outbreak, all maritime stakeholders in Nigeria must develop risk assessments and safety intervention guidelines for their personnel and operations on the areas of vulnerabilities of their maritime operations that can be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, including but not limited to offshore operations such as crew personnel changes, visits from onshore and other locations for provision of supplies, maintenance and repairs, etc. All ongoing and/or other scheduled offshore operations requiring new crew or crew changes from the affected countries shall ensure that pre-departure tests for COVID-19 are conducted on such persons, and self-isolation procedures for the prescribed period are instituted for such new crew personnel before exposure to other personnel. NIMASA had said in March that only international marine vessels which had planned and informed of their call into a Nigerian port not later than 1st of February 2020 may be allowed to call on such port.
We're dedicated to informing you about what NIMASA has done to ensure that COVID-19 does not spread in Nigeria via the maritime sector. You've heard some of the measures put in place. Other stringent measures were also put in place, one of them being the fact that no international vessel can land on our ports or in our ports without having thermal screening facilities for crew members and passengers.
Port Health Officer shall carry out thermal screening of all the passengers and crew members on board ship, and until clearance is given by the Port Health Officer, no passengers and or crew members shall be allowed ashore. That if any passengers and or crew members show signs or symptoms of the disease, disembarking of such passengers and crew shall not be permitted. That such passengers shall be quarantined on the ship, and samples of the patient shall be collected and sent to designated hospital lab for testing. If sample is tested positive, the passenger shall be taken to the isolation facility attached to the port, and the ship shall be required to cast off.
We have that belief that Dr. Jamo is going to perform, because an insider must know where the soup reaches everybody. As an insider, you know the problem of you and I, you know the problem of dock workers, you know the problem of the seafarers, you know the problem of other stakeholders. So we don't need to be told that the man is going to perform. The man has started performing, and he's a proactive person. This was seafarer. You can see what he did. Unlike before, you keep on, the union will keep on writing. Extend the seafarer issues, the dock workers, this thing. No, he did it on his own. And that's why I keep on appreciating his effort. So if he continue like this, I don't think we have any problem, because he's from inside. He knows the problem. So you don't need to start telling the whole world that he's doing better or he's not doing better. He's doing better. And God is going to continue to protect him to do more better in the industry.
Any good leader would know that laws are put in place to make life better for those the laws are meant to guide. And so, with the guidelines that were put in place by the agency, stakeholders felt that some bit of it were, in gray areas, and they need to be clearer to make sure that things are not more difficult for them. And so, they had a session with NIMASA in March. The team was led by the Executive Secretary of the Shippers Council.
In the thick of the lockdown, the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Shippers Council, Barrister Hassan Bello, led stakeholders including the Managing Director PIL Shipping, Jack Langrish, Managing Director Ports and Terminal Multi-Service Limited, Ascanio Russo, and the General Manager Arcus Line, Ian Lindsay, to meet with NIMASA management. They deliberated on how best to implement the new policies introduced by NIMASA.
We have come to the apex regulatory authority to look at all the issues, and I'm sure there must be a balance. Or if we can have a way of, going around some of them, or if actually some are not possible. But I'm concerned with the reception of, vessels. Vessels, they have international dimensions to that. Vessels should come here, be received, and they will leave, as quick as possible.
I think perhaps at this stage, if we may get a position from NIMASA as to what the current berthing restrictions are, that would be useful.
Just to give you another example, the total international marine vessel having thermal screening facilities for passengers and crew may be allowed in the port. It's not even clear what a thermal screening facility is, and it's important that we clarify all these issues.
After listening to all views, the NIMASA DG, Dr. Bashir Jamo, informed stakeholders that the agency will be guided by the feedback from stakeholders in the implementation of the new measures.
We have listened to this, your post carefully.
Yeah.
We have had the area of concerns that you mentioned. And as I said, it's not cast on stone.
No.
We will now go back and see the areas of feedback we receive so we can adjust. The marine notice gives also conditions to every aspect that we mentioned that we are going to address. And from time to time, our personnel, they are there to enforce for enforcement purposes. Where we have exceptions to the rule, we do listen to it. So as I said, it's just to provide the enabling environment and for the international community to understand where we are.
Now you can see that the success that NIMASA had this period was basically because it listened to the stakeholders. The stakeholders are actually the meat of that sector. Seeing that success, the DG NIMASA took it a step further by asking officials of the agency to meet with some other bodies like port health officials and the Nigerian Immigration Service. You'll find out why these people are very important. Just watch this.
So the first set of visitors were the port health officers. They are the first set of people who come in contact with seafarers on board vessels calling at Nigerian ports.
We need to check the level of compliance, particularly as it affects the current ravaging pandemic, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And the agency felt the need to discuss this with the port health services, because basically they are the first to make contacts with any vessels that come into the country. So there was a need for us to be sure and see what level of compliance they have with that, to see how our vessels are doing and how well we can have a collaboration with the port health services to ensure that real-time information and data sharing gets to us with regards to a lot of things happening within the sector at this particular time.
What NIMASA actually is doing in related with agencies such as Port Health is to make sure those practical steps are adhered to, basic health standards that has been mentioned time and over time while on board, and even assure social distance, having sanitizer, keep to minimum basic health standards while on board and ashore.
I appreciate it very well because when you bring two heads together, you get more experience. We are now merging health and safety together to work out a very good avenue for all people that are accessing Port Apapa Port. And those workers that interfere with any ship that come and dock in our berths.
After the port health officers, the agency also met with the immigration officers who work at the nation's seaports.
We're looking for an avenue for such collaboration. Synergy is something that is very important in every organization's operation. So I'm very, very happy about this. I'm looking forward for more collaboration with NIMASA because we are all stakeholders in the marine industry.
Introducing the new face of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA. We are charting the direction for a maritime and regulating the industry for a better, bigger, and more economically stable Nigeria. Evolved to serve you better. We are NIMASA. New face, rejuvenated service. NIMASA, changing the tides in your favor.
Now in March, the IMO had to do something fast because they were afraid that shipping and the supply chain would be affected by all the restrictions caused by COVID-19. And so they asked for governments to really step in to make sure that some form of exemptions were given to professional seafarers and marine personnel. And this would help in the area of crew change, repatriation where necessary, and so remove any form of national restrictions when it comes to movements and travels. In Nigeria, NIMASA had to put some things in place too to make sure that this call by the IMO was duly implemented here.
The Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, has extended the validity of statutory and trading certificates for all Nigerian registered vessels. These include standards of training, certification and watchkeeping (STCW) certificates for seafarers issued by the agency. The Director General of NIMASA, Dr. Bashir Jamo, who made this known at the agency's head office in Lagos, said NIMASA remained committed to implementing its mandates during the COVID-19 crisis. Dr. Jamo said it was necessary to ensure uninterrupted shipping despite the pandemic, stressing that shipping is one of the major ways of moving medical aid across the globe. He said the agency was aware of the difficulties seafarers would be facing and the need to keep them in the job even beyond the pandemic, saying this has necessitated the agency's publication of a notice to extend their certificates and other statutory certificates that would ensure uninterrupted shipping. Following IMO's recent guidelines on the certification of seafarers and fishing vessel personnel, NIMASA extended the validity of relevant certificates including STCW, mandatory and safety certificates, and certificates of medical fitness. Others are the statutory and trading certificates related to SOLAS 74 as amended, MARPOL 7378 as amended, certificates of ship registry, national requirements for power-driven small crafts PDSC, and MLC 2006 as amended. The extension will apply to all Nigerian flagged vessels and seafarers sailing on board Nigerian flagged vessels, as well as seafarers with Nigerian Certificate of Competency who are sailing on foreign flagships.
Now, as if this wasn't enough, NIMASA again declared dock workers and seafarers as essential workers. That means this would give them the permission to go about their duties without being stopped. But there was this thing that you had to identify yourself properly. Now, this got international commendations. Should I say, it got accolades worldwide.
In line with the newly endorsed protocols by the International Maritime Organization IMO, designed to lift barriers to crew changes, the management of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, has designated seafarers and dock workers as essential workers who should be exempted from travel restrictions. The guidelines, newly developed and published by the agency to support essential shipping services in Nigeria, declared dock workers at the country's seaports, terminals and jetties as essential to the national economy and therefore be granted passage between their residences and the seaports, terminals and jetties to perform their duties. The NIMASA guidelines also declared seafarers as being on essential duty and as such exempted from the curfew and travel restrictions which may hinder necessary movement for crew change, and directed companies to provide special and dedicated means of transportation to convey the seafarers, and such transport system must be disinfected within the recommended minimum hours. The DG said the guideline is part of efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus pandemic in the shipping sector in Nigeria. We have directed the immediate isolation of any suspected case of COVID-19 infections and promptly reported to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC). Employers in the Nigerian maritime sector are responsible for providing adequate protective clothing and protective equipment at no cost to the dock workers. Dr. Jamo also declared that playing of games and unnecessary loitering around port premises are hereby prohibited, charging dock labor employers to ensure social distancing of 2 meters maintained between people in the workplace and other public spaces within and around port terminals. The guidelines were in sync with those issued by the United Nations agencies, including the World Health Organization (WHO), the International Maritime Organization (IMO), and International Labour Organization (ILO), as well as the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC).
The first requirement that needs to be adhered to is the federal government directive on COVID-19 concerning ships and seamen in port, and that reference was made specifically to the NCDC, Nigerian Center for Disease Control, as well as the Port Health.
The International Maritime Organization (IMO) mandated the adoption of the International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMDG) Code in conjunction with the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea (SOLAS), and the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, MARPOL 7378, in alignment with the MARPOL Annexes 2, being supplemented by the International Code for the Construction and Equipment of Ships Carrying Dangerous Chemicals in Bulk, IBC Code, towards sustainable management of the marine environment. As the designated authority in Nigeria, the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, drawing its powers from Section 45, Subsection 6A, Part 10 of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency Act of 2007, which expressly allows NIMASA to make regulations in conformity with the IMDG Code in Nigeria, hereby requires all stakeholders responsible for the shipment and transportation of dangerous goods on sea to document such goods by completing the relevant sections on this portal. Failure to document these items on this portal is a punishable offense.
Now let's come back home. All through the real dark periods of the pandemic, some members of staff of NIMASA still had to work. NIMASA made sure it put everything in place to ensure their safety. Now, not only for them, for staff generally, a lot of things were put in place to ensure that the labor arm of the maritime sector stayed safe. Extensive fumigation services had to be carried out in the workplace before staff could come in.
In preparation for the higher human traffic to the various offices of NIMASA, the Director General of the agency, Dr. Bashir Yusuf Jamo, and his management team ensured the fumigation of the entire office complex. Environmentalists, well kitted, took their time to fumigate the entire complex. They moved from floor to floor. No corner was left untouched. Strict compliance to social distancing, temperature checks, and hand washing at the entrance gate was now a way of life.
We also ensure that it's just key stakeholders that are coming, mostly the shipping companies, the cabotage operators, or those who access the ship registry. Visitors have been banned totally from coming into the building. Likewise, all kinds of people, maybe vendors of different kinds.
From the gates, staff move into their offices, who are sitting at workstations and now in line with social distancing. Officers who spoke to NIMASA this week were appreciative of management's efforts to ensure a safe work environment.
The coronavirus pandemic is real. The Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, wants you to stay safe. Observe social distancing by avoiding crowded areas. Cough or sneeze into a curved elbow or into a tissue, which should be disposed of immediately. Wash your hands regularly with soap or use hand sanitizers. And most importantly, stay at home and follow health and safety advice coming from the NCDC and the WHO. Together, we will win the war against the coronavirus. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA. NIMASA, changing the tide in your favor.
I'm sure you better understand now how NIMASA managed to keep things alive in the shipping industry and the maritime sector all through the thick of the pandemic lockdown. Well, thank you for being a part of the program today. That is it for today. I'll be back next time. Till then, stay safe and be smart about everything COVID-19. My name is Cordelia Obe. Bye-bye.